The psychology of people who cut others off without explanation. Have you ever been cut off by someone with no warning, no fight, no explanation? One day you're talking. The next day, you don't exist. No closure. No goodbye. Just silence. And the silence messes with your head more than any argument ever could. You replay every conversation, every joke, every message. You ask yourself what you did wrong. You look for mistakes that might not even exist. But here's the truth most people never tell you. When someone cuts you off without explanation, it usually has very little to do with you. It has everything to do with how they handle emotional discomfort. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who had a close friend for years. They talked almost every day, shared secrets, dreams, plans. One day, the messages stopped. Calls went unanswered. No argument. No betrayal. Nothing obvious. Weeks passed. Then months. The man blamed himself. He assumed he must have crossed a line. He tried to apologize for things he wasn't even sure he did. But years later, he found out the truth. The friend had been overwhelmed, struggling internally, ashamed of how lost he felt. And instead of communicating, he disappeared. Not because he hated the man, but because disappearing felt easier than explaining his pain. This is the first psychological pattern behind silent cutoffs. Avoidance. Some people are deeply uncomfortable with emotional confrontation. They were never taught how to express discomfort, disappointment, or change. So when emotions get heavy, they don't talk. They escape. Cutting someone off without explanation is their way of regaining control without facing vulnerability. The second reason is emotional overload. Some people absorb emotions like a sponge. They feel everything intensely. Relationships exhaust them faster than they admit. So instead of setting boundaries slowly, they shut the door completely. Not because the other person is toxic, but because they don't know how to regulate closeness. To them, disappearing feels like self-preservation. The third reason is identity conflict. Sometimes people cut others off when they're changing. A new phase, a new version of themselves, and you remind them of who they used to be. That reminder feels uncomfortable. So instead of explaining the change, they erase the connection. Silence becomes a way to avoid guilt. Then there's the darkest reason. Control. For some, cutting someone off without explanation is a power move. Silence becomes a weapon. It keeps the other person confused, chasing answers, questioning themselves. This behavior often comes from insecurity. If they can't control how they feel, they control how much access you have to them. But here's the part no one prepares you for. Being cut off triggers something deep in the human brain. The need for closure. Your mind hates unfinished stories, so it creates its own explanations, usually painful ones. I wasn't enough. I said something wrong. I was replaceable. But silence is not proof. Silence is a lack of courage, not a verdict on your worth. People who communicate their boundaries don't disappear. They explain. They talk. They close the chapter properly. Ghosting without explanation is not emotional strength. It's emotional avoidance. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't heal by getting an explanation from someone who chose silence. You heal by realizing that someone capable of disappearing like that was never capable of giving you the clarity you deserve. Closure doesn't come from them. It comes from understanding the pattern. If they cut you off without explanation, they showed you how they handle discomfort, conflict, and responsibility. And that information is more valuable than any apology. Sometimes silence is the answer. Not the one you wanted, but the one you needed to see who they really were. If this made you think of someone, you're not weak. You're human. And if you've ever been on the other side, remember this. Disappearing avoids pain in the short term, but it leaves scars in people who trusted you. If this video gave you clarity, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe if you want more deep psychology that actually changes how you see people. And comment one word that describes how silence made you feel. Sometimes understanding is the real closure.